This is Guadalcanal, the largest island of the Solomon Islands. Guadalcanal has an unusually peaceful appearance, with blue sea, white sand, and coconut trees leaning towards the sea. But that is the present time. Let's go back in time to the same week in November 1942. It was here that a series of fierce battles took place in the air, on land, and at sea. Thousands of soldiers fell on each sandbar of the island. That was when the Guadalcanal campaign took place, marking the first major counterattack of the Allies against the Japanese Empire in the South Pacific after a long period of defense. In the fall of 1942, after a heavy defeat at Midway, the Japanese were forced to advance further into the South Pacific. With the Solomon Islands as their target, Japan plotted to set up a blockade to block the door to Australia, isolating this country from the United States while creating an outer defense to prevent the risk of Japanese territory being directly attacked. In May 1942, the Japanese occupied Tulagi Island and established a seaplane base there. 2 months later, the Japanese turned Guadalcanal Island into a forward base by constructing a large airfield at Lunga Point on the north side of the island to protect the vital port of Rabaul, 200 miles to the northwest. At the same time, it allowed aircraft to threaten Allied bases in the New Hebrides and Port Moresby. With the information in hand, the American generals quickly grasped the Japanese intentions and sensed the danger that the Allied forces were about to face. Immediately, a strategic counterattack plan to expel the Japanese from the Solomon Islands was conceived and drafted by these two men: General Ernest King, Commander-in-Chief of the U.S. Fleet, and General Chester Nimitz, Commander-in-Chief of the Pacific Fleet. According to the plan, the counterattack, with the participation of most of the South Pacific forces, would be carried out in 3 phases, including Phase 1, with attacks to capture the Japanese airbase at Tulagi, capture Guadalcanal Island, and focus on Operation Watchtower. Phase 2, with the goal of capturing the remaining parts of the Solomon Islands. Ending with Phase 3, when the Allies successfully captured New Guinea Island and Rabaul on New Britain Island. On August 7, 1942, the Guadalcanal counterattack in the South Pacific officially opened with Operation Watchtower, commanded by Rear Admiral Frank Fletcher. 82 troop carriers, supported by 3 aircraft carriers, 1 battleship, 5 cruisers, and 16 destroyers, landed troops on the islands of Tulagi and Guadalcanal at the same time. The Japanese were taken completely by surprise, quickly abandoned their defensive positions, fled deep into the center of the island, and then radioed to the command in Rabaul. Knowing where to find bases on the attacked islands, the Japanese quickly sent aircraft to bombard the landing beaches. The effort did not prevent 17,000 Allied troops from landing on Guadalcanal and Tulagi that same night. By sunset on August 8, the Allied forces had completed control of Tulagi and the surrounding islands. The airfield that the Japanese were building at Lunga Point was occupied and used by the Americans under the name Henderson. In the face of the dangerous situation, that same night, a fleet of 5 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 1 destroyer under the command of Vice Admiral Gunichi Mikawa penetrated the waters between Guadalcanal and Tulagi, attacked the American fleet responsible for protecting the transport ships that were landing troops on the island. The surprise attack resulted in the sinking of 4 American and Australian cruisers. The Allies were forced to withdraw their naval forces from the area on the evening of August 9th, leaving the Marines on shore without heavy weapons and supplies. Unaware that the American carriers had withdrawn, and fearing that they would be attacked by Japanese aircraft at dawn if they remained, Mikawa ordered his squadron to retreat to Rabaul, missing the opportunity to attack the unprotected transports. This was the first of a series of mistakes made by the Japanese general staff. The biggest mistake was that they assumed that the Allies could only land a maximum of 2,000 troops and light weapons on the island. and that the operation would be a hit-and-run operation for the Allies, with no strategic scope. However, General Kiyotake Kawaguchi had a different assessment. He believed that the Americans had begun their counterattack, and that this was a strategic operation for them to fight for a long time, and that the Allied forces on the island were much larger than 2,000, at least 10,000. However, not many commanders in the general staff listened to him, leading to only a small counterattack force of 6,000 troops, including General Kawaguchi's brigade, the Great Ichiki's brigade, and the Naval Assault Battalion sent to Rabaul. On the night of August 18th, a Japanese Marine brigade, commanded by General Ichiki, successfully landed on Guadalcanal, without encountering a single shadow or shot from the Allied forces. Ichiki believed that the enemy, with its limited forces, had been forced to retreat deep into the jungles, which was the Japanese soldiers' favorite fighting formation. This made the commander somewhat complacent. They decided to let the brigade advance through the jungle to the old airport to sneak deep into the enemy's supply lines, while leaving only 125 troops to hold the bridgehead. At dawn on August 21st, due to underestimating the enemy's strength, Ichiki's unit decided to launch a frontal attack on the Allied position at the Ihu River. However, the Japanese army did not know that American reconnaissance had known their position and direction of attack the day before. The Allies had arranged an ambush formation with tanks and armored vehicles to support them. Facing overwhelming enemy firepower, the Japanese brigade's attack was crushed. Colonel Ichiki had to burn the brigade flag and died with his unit. Only 2 survivors went through the jungle to report to the force holding the bridgehead. The news of defeat reached Rabaul, surprising the Japanese generals. General Kawaguchi's assessment was correct. Not only did the U.S. land a large number of troops, but they also brought tanks to the island. Faced with that reality, Admiral Yamamoto believed that the U.S. would be here at all costs, and they would certainly send a fleet carrying more troops from the area. In danger, there was opportunity. The most excellent general of the Japanese Navy realized that this would be a great opportunity to destroy the entire U.S. Pacific Fleet, forcing this country to withdraw from the war. With the Allies on the island, after losing supplies, they would either surrender or be destroyed. Seizing the opportunity, Yamamoto decided to send the strongest units of his combined fleet to the Solomon Islands. Led by a reinforcement force consisting of 6 cruisers, 1 seaplane carrier, and 6 submarines, commanded by Vice Admiral Nobutake Kondo, providing support to 4 naval transport ships carrying the remaining forces of the Ichiki Brigade and the Naval Shock Battalion. Next came the strike force commanded by Vice Admiral Nagumo, consisting of 2 aircraft carriers, Zuikaku and Shokaku, 2 battleships, 3 heavy cruisers, and a decoy squadron consisting of the light aircraft carrier Ryujo, 1 heavy cruiser, and 2 destroyers. At the same time, the task force commanded by Admiral Fletcher, consisting of 3 aircraft carriers, Enterprise Saratoga and WAPS, 7 cruisers, and 18 destroyers, headed for Guadalcanal, ready to deal with the Japanese attack. The Battle of the Eastern Solomons was drawing near. On the afternoon of August 24th, the Japanese decoy formation approached Guadalcanal. Aircraft from each Ryujo class attacked Henderson Field. Upon receiving the news, Admiral Fletcher immediately sent out 30 bombers to search for and destroy the Japanese aircraft carriers. The Ryujo was sunk by torpedoes, but it had completed its mission of luring the enemy to open fire, forcing them to retreat. Nagumo's units were able to locate the American carriers. Nearly 100 Japanese aircraft from Zuikaku and Shokaku attacked the Saratoga and Enterprise before dark. The naval battle ended with both fleets retreating with heavy losses. Nagumo lost 1 carrier, the Ryujo, and 70 aircraft. Fletcher lost 17 aircraft, and the Enterprise was badly damaged. The American planes continued to hunt the Japanese landing force, forcing it to take refuge on a small island south of Bougainville. It was not until the night of August 31st that Kawaguchi's force and the remainder of Ichiki's brigade, numbering about 4,200, landed at 2 locations east and west of Henderson Field. On September 7th, Kawaguchi announced his plan to attack the vicinity of Henderson Field in 3 attacks. The first force, commanded by Colonel Oka, would attack the airport's outskirts from the west. The second force, the Ichiki Force, renamed the Kuma Battalion, would attack from the east. The third force, with 3,000 troops from Kawaguchi's 3 battalions, would attack from the jungle south of the Lunga area. However, thanks to intelligence gathered at Tashimoko, the Allied commanders correctly predicted that the Japanese would attack along the Lunga Hills just behind Henderson Field. Capturing this hill would give the Japanese direct access to the airfield and control the surrounding areas. On the 22nd of September, Kawaguchi's 1st Battalion opened fire on the area between the Lunga River and the hills, forcing a company of U.S. Marines to retreat. The following night, this force continued to attack and broke through Colonel Edison's formation on the west side of the hills. However, their attack was quickly stopped by Allied forces defending the northern part. Kawaguchi's 2 companies of the 2nd Battalion attacked from the south, forcing the Americans to retreat to the center of the ridge. The Marines then counterattacked with artillery support and repelled several Japanese attacks. Attacks by the Kuma Battalion and Oka's unit at other locations in the outer Lunga were also defeated. On September 14th, after 5 days of sustained fighting, Kawaguchi led the remainder of his brigade toward the Matanikau Valley and joined up with Oka's unit. The force then continued through the jungle, returning to the bridgehead to send out the wounded and request reinforcements to Rabaul. Learning from this favorable experience, General Yamamoto decided to send the entire 17th Corps under Lieutenant General Harukichi Hyakutake to the battlefield. In response, the U.S. reinforced the Guadalcanal battlefield with several infantry divisions, increasing the total number of troops there to 25,000. With a large force and enough food and ammunition for 6 months, the Allied forces on the island could repel the Japanese troops on their own without needing outside support. At this point, Yamamoto could only rely on the 17th Corps. From October 1st to 17, Japan sent an additional 15,000 troops to Guadalcanal, bringing General Hyakutake's total force to 20,000. According to the plan, this force would be divided into 2 wings to attack Henderson Field on the night of October 21st, of which the main force of the 2nd Law Division under General Masao Maruyama would march through the forest and then attack from the mountains. The 2nd contingent, led by Major General Tadashi Sumiyoshi, was to attack from the sea, serving as a coordinating and diversionary force. However, the actual developments on the battlefield soon turned unfavorable for the Japanese. The 1st contingent under General Maruyama encountered difficulties during the march and failed to reach the starting point in time, causing the attack to be postponed to the night of the 23rd. At the same time, Sumiyoshi's contingent from the sea, not having received the order to postpone, opened fire and attacked on the night of the 20th, forcing this force to stand alone and endure the full counterattack of the American forces, which had tank support. By the time the 2nd contingent advanced, they fell into a minefield and were heavily attacked by the American infantry divisions. The entire 2nd Regiment, the most elite unit of Japan's 2nd Division, was wiped out. General Maruyama suddenly fell ill, and command was handed over to the Deputy Division Commander, General Nasus. The Japanese continued to launch many more attacks in the following 2 days and nights, losing no more than 3,000 soldiers but still failing to achieve the set goal. So, 3 attacks, 3 failures. However, the Japanese still did not stop. Once again, the Japanese army planned to retake Henderson Field in November 1942. Accordingly, a group of 11 transports, protected by the battleships Hiei and Kirishima, was mobilized under the command of Vice Admiral Hiroaki Abe to transport the remaining 7,000 men of the 38th Infantry Division, along with ammunition and food, from Rabaul to Guadalcanal. The Allies also quickly grasped the Japanese plan to retake the area. They sent Task Force 6-7 under the command of Turner and 2 task forces under Rear Admirals Daniel Callaghan and Norman Scott to reinforce Guadalcanal and supply troops. At dawn on November 13th, Hiroaki Abe's 2 groups were intercepted by Daniel Callaghan's force of 2 heavy cruisers, 3 light cruisers, and 4 destroyers. A series of close-range artillery battles took place. Aircraft from both sides, aircraft carriers frantically attacked the enemy's ships. After the battle, Japan sank and severely damaged Callaghan's entire force, except for 1 light cruiser and 1 destroyer. Rear Admirals Callaghan and Scott were both killed in the battle. On the Japanese side, 2 destroyers were sunk, and 1 destroyer and 1 battleship were severely damaged. However, despite defeating the Allied forces, Abe ordered a retreat without bombarding Henderson Field as planned. That decision turned Callaghan's tactical defeat into a strategic victory for the United States when Henderson Field was not bombarded. Allied aircraft were allowed to attack the Japanese convoy supplying Guadalcanal. General Hyakutaki's attack on Henderson Field also went up in smoke. Continuing to fail, he was also attacked by the Allied forces on the island of New Guinea. The Japanese command had to restructure its forces. Accordingly, the 17th Army Corps would be responsible for the Solomon Islands. The 18th Army Corps would defend New Guinea from attacks by the Americans and Australians. Both armies combined into the 8th Regional Army Group under the command of General Hitoshi Imamura. To observe the battlefield, Imamura believed that to win at Guadalcanal, there must be 370,000 tons of weapons, food, and medicine. To meet this requirement, a unit of 8 destroyers of the 8th Fleet, commanded by Admiral Raizo Tanaka, was assigned to supply the army on Guadalcanal. Tanaka's force, while in the waters off Guadalcanal, was attacked by Admiral Wright's 4 cruisers and 4 destroyers. Torpedoes from the American ship sank a Japanese destroyer escort. Tanaka's remaining ships escaped, but were unable to deliver any supplies to the island. Resupply efforts continued on December 3rd, 7th, and 11th, but were insufficient to meet the needs of the Japanese troops on the island. At the same time, the Americans increased their use of aircraft to attack Tanaka's unit, making resupply impossible. The effort to deliver 370,000 tons of supplies to the Japanese troops holding Guadalcanal became hopeless. They soon fell into a serious shortage of food and medicine, causing about 50 soldiers to die each day from malnutrition and disease. It was time for the Japanese to retreat. On December 19th, a delegation led by Colonel Yoichiro Sanada visited Rabaul and consulted with Imamura. After returning to Tokyo, Sanada proposed abandoning Guadalcanal. A week later, the Japanese General Headquarters accepted the proposal. The General Staff was immediately instructed to draw up a plan for the withdrawal from Guadalcanal. On December 31st, Emperor Hirohito formally approved the withdrawal plan presented by General Hajime Sugiyama and Admiral Osami Nagano under the name Operation Key. On January 14th, Japanese aircraft and warships took up positions around Rabaul and Bougainville in preparation for the withdrawal. On January 29th, the Japanese 17th Army withdrew to the west coast while the rear guard held off the American attack. Fierce fighting ensued. On the night of February 1st, a force of 20 destroyers of the 8th Fleet, under the command of General Ryutaro Hashimoto, successfully evacuated 4,935 soldiers, mainly from the 38th Division, from the island. During the following nights of February 4th and 7th, this unit completed the evacuation of most of the remaining forces. A total of 10,652 Japanese soldiers were safely evacuated from Guadalcanal. By February 9th, the U.S. commander confirmed that the Japanese had completely withdrawn, declaring the Guadalcanal campaign a victory. It can be seen that throughout the Guadalcanal campaign, the Japanese, who were passive in the face of Allied attacks, actively turned Guadalcanal into bait to attract and destroy the U.S. Pacific Fleet, as General Yamamoto had intended. However, the Americans understood this intention and joined the war. Then, after a series of strategic mistakes and limited ability to dissipate resources, the Japanese fascists were defeated, losing many strategic islands to the Allies. Now, with the disastrous defeat at Guadalcanal, the tide has turned in the Pacific. The advantage was no longer on the Japanese side. The U.S. had begun to attack and won. The echoes of the Guadalcanal campaign were so great that even today, even though 81 years have passed, it is still a topic of endless debate among modern historians. Many opinions believe that Guadalcanal was where the real turning point took place, demonstrating the superior combat level of the U.S. military. marking the time when the fascist navy was gradually moving towards total defeat. However, some other opinions believe that, right after the Battle of Midway, the Japanese were basically no longer opponents to the US military. The victory of the Allies was simply due to the absolute advantage in war potential.